Things out, so it's nice to be socially distanced here with some actual non-Zoom action today. I wish we were here in celebration. We're not. We're here today in reflection. And the events of Colorado yesterday have us pause even further. Loss of life, needless loss of life in our nation, in our communities, is heartbreaking, and that's why we're here today. I want to thank several elected officials and others for joining today. First, Senator Jamie Iwamoto. I have the honor of working with Jamie up there and down here for several years, and she's a very dear friend. Thank you for being here. Representative Karen Kwan, one of our amazing House leaders. Of course, Sheriff Rosie Rivera, and our DA, Sim Gill. Thank you for being here. I also saw Mayor Dirk Burton. Let's see, where is the mayor? Thanks for being here. Mayor Burton is the mayor of West Jordan. And then we had some other mayors who were planning to be here and maybe coming in. Did I miss anyone? Thank you. And Darren is here. And, Jake. Okay, sorry. They're all spread out with masks on. So, Jake Fitzimano, and then Tom Wynn. Is Tom here? Thank you for being here. I want to recognize Chair Pastor Corey Hodges, who is our CODA chair. And there you are. I look around the room and see so many leaders and friends, and so grateful for you. So hopefully I didn't miss anyone. Very grateful that you would all take the time on this day. So Salt Lake County is and always will be a welcoming county. Diversity makes us stronger. Inclusiveness is so critical to our success. And when we feel and see the sadness of recent days with life's loss, we need to stand together as a community. So today I stand in solidarity and as an ally to denounce hate. And I'm also here to ask that our community take action. We are going to have a couple of speakers in a minute, but I want to first note that in the last year, there have been 3,800 instances of violence against people of Asian and Pacific Islander descent here in the United States. And a week ago, the murder of innocent people in Atlanta once again demonstrates that hate, fear, and blame against the Asian American community cannot stand. Hate against any communities cannot stand. And we know that these crimes are not unique to the Asian community, but we know that xenophobia, sexism, bigotry have always been a reality in marginalized communities. But over the past year, our awareness of this problem has been magnified. So the first step today is to recognize and call attention to these horrific acts of violence and stand together. And I also want to say that after a year that we have experienced, this year of isolation, as we come together, I think it's even more important now that we show appreciation, love, understanding, and compassion in this community. And I think about my own journey as a fifth generation Utah, how it's been strengthened over the years. I had the chance to go out to Delta, Utah recently and to the museum there, which is amazing. Suggest all of you take that journey out to Delta and visit the beautiful museum that memorializes a difficult time in our state's history of Japanese internment in Delta, Utah. And it was really meaningful to me. I actually saw names of people I know and have talked to Senator Iwamoto about friends in the Japanese community that are still with us in our community today, who were held behind walls in rural central Utah. And it is an important journey to take. That's one suggestion I'd make. Additionally, I have the honor of being close friends with a woman who, I get a little emotional, who arrived here on Halloween Day in the 70s with her family fleeing Vietnam. And she is a successful businesswoman today. She's a cherished friend, a member of this community. And I think about the journey of a young woman. She shares the story of Halloween arriving, and they were able to find some food that was familiar to them, and they were enjoying their first meal in their little apartment, and the doorbell rang, and all of a sudden children in costumes, and they didn't know what to think about America. Her journey since then has been one of engagement in this community and success, as is the journey of so many Asian refugees and people who have come over the years. And then I want to acknowledge the workers, the Chinese workers who helped us build the Transcontinental Railroad here, and the footprint that they made for the discovery of Utah, our economic success. And we celebrated the meeting of the railroads just, I think, 2 years ago, 1 year ago. I've lost track due to COVID, but we recognized at that time the Chinese workers that were so instrumental in what is now the success of Utah. I cherish my friends in the Asian community, the Pacific Islander community. My high school experience was dear friends, and throughout time since then from the Pacific Islander community, and I'm so proud of the impact that they have had here as well. So with that, I'd like to turn the time over to Tani Iwamoto, and after Senator Iwamoto, I'll just read the order now so we can keep this program moving. We will then hear from Representative Karen Kwan, our Sheriff Rosie Rivera, and our DA Singill, in that order. So thank you, Senator.
Well, thank you for having me. There are tragic and defining moments that bring people together, and along with the understandable anger, stress, fear, comes solidarity, and hopefully a call to action, as well as transformational and meaningful change. 1 week ago today, on Tuesday, March 16th, 8 lives were lost, 6 Asian. They were Dao Youfang, Xiaojie Tan, Chun Chong Grant, Sun Chao Kim, Sun Chong Park, Young Ed Yu, Paul Andre Michaels, and Delana Ashley Yan Gonzalez. There have been other senseless and intentionally malicious attacks on innocent lives since the pandemic began. Although words were directed at Chinese, of course the targets have been any individual within the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. How heart-wrenching it was to see videos of brutal attacks on the elderly, including the murder of the 84-year-old Thai man in San Francisco's Anza Vista neighborhood, nearby where I used to live. The AAPI community has experienced past discrimination dating back to the Chinese Exclusion Act of '82, World War II, and the incarceration of Japanese Americans, the murder of Vincent Chin, and others. Through the eyes of my parents in their generation, the Nisei, and the generation before them, the Issei, I know that even as Americans, our personal rights guaranteed under our sacred Constitution can be taken from us, and history most definitely repeats itself. While I was attending law school, Vincent Chin, a Chinese American engineering technician, was savagely murdered in Detroit. He was targeted by Ronald Evans and his stepson, Michael Nitz. Vincent Chin was blamed for their being laid off at Chrysler because of the competition with the Japanese auto industry, and targeted despite the fact that Vincent Chin was Chinese, not Japanese. After retrieving a bat and in a chase, which lasted 30 minutes, they found Vincent in a McDonald's parking lot. Nitz held Vincent while Evans repeatedly bludgeoned him with a baseball bat until Vincent's head cracked open. Vincent Chin was to be married 8 days later. Nitz and Evans were charged with second-degree murder, but ended up with a $3,000 fine, a $780 court cost, and probation. Since the beginning of the pandemic, there have been nearly 4,000 hate reports against Asians across the United States to racism and xenophobia. These reports are just a fraction of the number of hate incidents that actually occur. and they are on the rise as well. Using police department statistics, a recent study reports 16 US cities found a nearly 150% surge in anti-Asian hate crimes in 2020, while overall hate crimes fell by 7%. This shows a troubling and growing trend among Asian Americans. Another disturbing trend is that 68% of these victims of these hate crimes have been against women. And in Georgia, this shows what is called intersectional dynamic, where Asian women are seen as easy targets. This is an example of the coalescence of sexism and racism. Our AAPI community is relatively invisible and indiscernible. Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders encompass a wide range of diversity with a range of up to 50 ethnic groups and over 100 languages. Over 24 million Americans, or 7.3% of the US population, are AAPI. AAPIs are an important and integral part of our country and state. Our demographics here are changing. Our diversity should be celebrated. Salt Lake County recognizes the strength of that diversity and what it brings, and is committed to providing opportunities to all of its residents. And I am proud to have served in our county council with then council member Jenny Wilson, who is now our mayor. Our AAPI communities are hurting. Although Utah's reported numbers are not indicated, incidents are occurring. We know that fear exists within our Asian businesses and community. We are not immune. Let us take this horrific and unspeakable acts of hate and discrimination, xenophobia, and look to becoming edited, working with our law enforcement and standing in solidarity against hate. Let us see and know our diverse communities, hear our concerns. Let us report what is actually happening. We must provide adequate resources in our counties and state. Words matter and have been attributed to precipitous rise in anti-Asian violence. Actions matter. If we see hateful behavior, we cannot idly stand by. Let us remember the words of philosopher George Santayana. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Thank you for having me.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to repeat my name just in case you forgot who is next. I'm Representative Karen Kwan. I represent District 34, which is Taylorsville, Mill Creek, Murray, and West Valley City. And I'm actually the very first Chinese American ever to serve in the legislature here. I'm a descendant of a Chinese railroad worker, which makes this especially meaningful to me because I'm not only honoring our community and speaking out against anti-Asian hate, but also representing my own ancestor through racist and discriminatory policies. I don't even know his name because Chinese railroad workers at the time were not considered important enough to have their names recorded. I wanted to start by talking about well, first let me thank Mayor Wilson and Senator Iwamoto for their comments. Some of the comments that Senator Iwamoto brought up are what I was going to say, which underscores that there's context to this. There are comments and information that our Asian and Pacific Islander community have talked about for generations, but they often have gone unheard and unseen, much like our community. Utah DPS reports that in this last year, we've had nearly 800 crimes against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Zero of these are considered hate crimes, which underscores how inconsistent and underreported hate crimes are. I recently, this weekend, came back from, I visited Topaz internment site, and it was such a humbling experience. It showed the discriminatory policies and the racist policies of the past. It shows the context by which we find ourselves today, that it's not even our ancestors. You know, we have community members right here in Utah, right here in Salt Lake City, who have been interned in these concentration camps. And the fight that they had, the things that they worked against, it was so humbling that we continue to see this type of anti-Asian violence continuing in our communities. And then I went over to Fillmore and we saw the Territorial State House. And I saw the flags at half-mast. And I knew they were half-mast because President Biden ordered them to be so, out of respect for the victims, their families, and our Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. This is a very different experience that we have today, even from a year ago, that we should have such compassionate leaders. And I want to point to our own governor, our state leaders, our mayors, our county mayors, the compassion by which we see afforded to our communities as Americans. We did not have a generation ago. The terrible tragedy that happened in Atlanta and that is happening all over the nation with 150% increase in anti-Asian violence is a message to communities. This is something that our communities hear loud and clear. It is within a context of violence to BIPOC and other language minorities. Our history as Asian American Pacific Islanders is either racialized or invisible. We are either perpetual foreigners or the model minority. And that model minority myth was used to set up to pit us against other BIPOC communities. In psychology, we call this in-group and out-group, and it's a system that we set up as humans. I mean, we don't. It's a social construction of us versus them, and it is used to other those of us who are not seen as the stereotypical Americans. This often leads Asian Pacific Islanders and other ethnic and racialized Americans as perpetual foreigners. The model minority myth has been used to pit us against other BIPOC communities, and we can go all the way back to the very beginning of Asian American immigration with the Chinese and mining immigration of the Chinese railroad workers and mining workers. That they actually were brought in to break up wage wars. Chinese Americans, the Chinese railroad workers work the hardest for the least amount of wages. We must continue to eliminate policies that are discriminatory. We must continue to speak out against Asian and Pacific Islander invisibility, anti-Asian hate. We must do this as a community. We must stand together. And I stand with Mayor Wilson and others to call for this call of action in small and in large ways. I call upon our community members to continue to frequent our Asian American Pacific Islander businesses, to take bystander training, and to be critically aware of our own assumptions as I strive to do that myself. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Sheriff Rosie Rivera. Before I get started, I just wanted to mention the heroic efforts Boulder police officer Eric Tully from yesterday. Giving his life to save lives is very heroic, and our hearts are breaking for that community. Last week in Atlanta really impacted our Asian American communities, our Pacific Islander communities. And as law enforcement, we are committed to continuing to try to do prevention in these times where these mass acts of violence continue to occur. And what we want to do is ensure that our Asian communities, Asian American communities, feel safe. In order to do that, we need you to report the crimes. In 2019, the hate crimes for Utah were reported at 45. We know there's more, but we also know many of the crimes go unreported. So what I'm asking you is to please trust your police departments and call and report any type of crime that you think may be a hate crime against your community. It's important. In order for us to get control of this, all acts of hate are not acceptable. And law enforcement, we are dealing with that on a daily basis. Yesterday and last week, perfect example. We are here for our communities. And I also want to comment that we have in law enforcement, we're a very diverse group. And my heart goes out to our employees, our deputies, and our officers who come from the Asian American communities and our Pacific Islanders. We think about them too, because they're on both sides and they know they have families who have been impacted, and they want to get involved and they want to help keep the community safe as well. So please listen to me today and remember, we're here to help. We're here to help keep you safe. We need you to report these crimes to us. And Mayor, thank you for everything that you have done to coordinate these events. I think it's important for all of us to come together and support our Asian American community right now and all of our communities at this time of tragic times. So thank you, Mayor.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sam Jones, Solid County District Attorney, and I just want to, before I start, I want to thank Mayor Wilson. Thank you for organizing this and giving opportunity for us to show these concerns, which are so important to our community. As an Asian American, as a person of color, as an elected district attorney, I want to thank everyone here today who have come to show solidarity to our Asian American and Pacific Islander communities in light of the tragedy in Atlanta. These tragedies remind us, unfortunately, far too often, how much work needs to be done and how much vigilance is necessary from all of us. Today, our hearts go out to this latest target of hate in the AIPI community in Atlanta, and as Sheriff Rivera mentioned, the violence that we even are witnessing in Boulder, Colorado. And the data shows us in the last year alone, nationally, some almost 4,000 incidents have targeted the AAIP communities. And those range from verbal assaults, physical assaults, civil rights violations, online harassment, and especially to women who are 2.3 times more likely, Asian women who are 2.3 times more likely to be targeted than men in the AAPI community. And unfortunately, that was on display in what happened in Atlanta. People can talk about whatever the motivations are, but two things we know for certain. It targeted Asians and it targeted women. There's no debate to that. And this event here today is really to voice our commitment to our Asian American community that you are not alone. You have allies, and that we as a community will not be silent to this conduct, this behavior, and we will call it out for the hate that it represents. This virus of hate, racism, sexism, and xenophobia finds expression in many ways. Today, it is the AAPI, but let's not forget, before it was Muslims. It was the LGBTQ plus community, our trans brothers and sisters, our African American communities, women, our Latino Hispanic communities, just to name a few. That is the insidious nature of hate. And that is why a community response, a leadership response, an ally response is so critical. Because it is about all of us coming together in opposition to those who would profess hate, speak hate, and act upon hate. When a hate crime is perpetrated, it has three victims. The individual who is the target of that hate, of that harm, the injury. The community that individual belongs to and identifies with, and the chill of fear and terror that is sent to that community. And finally, the larger community, all of us, where such acts are committed and sometimes even tolerated, because it impacts us. It destroys our sense of justice, fairness, and equality, which is the promise of America. We all have a shared interest in coming together. When we witness these acts, hear these acts, to forcefully renounce them, to forcefully reject them, and to forcefully repel such conduct. And we must say together in unison, not in our time, not in our communities, not with our brothers and sisters, not with our families, we will not be silent. We will not let you be alone. We will band together to protect, defend, and support the diversity this nation represents, and the diversity that this nation's promise is. And if you are a victim of hate crime, I want you to know, as Sheriff Rivera said, we want you to not be silent. There's 4 things I want you to take away from this. If you're a victim of crime, we want you to report it. And to our communities, we want you to respond with your voices as allies, because this virus impacts us all. And to our law enforcement, they will investigate it, and we as prosecutors, we will prosecute it. We are in this together. Mayor, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for everybody coming together to raise our voices of concern.
Thank you. Powerful words. Thank you, Senator, Representative, Sheriff, Mr. DA. So tomorrow, our Council of Diversity Affairs will formally adopt its action plan. And this action plan is comprised of measurable, actionable steps that will guide its work in eradicating systemic bias and institutional racism. And if you're asking what you can do today, thank you for some tangible direction provided. And I want to thank my Office of Diversity Affairs and Inclusion and Office of New Americans, Zhao, there she is, and Efren Garcia. Thank you for pulling together a few things that we're going to touch on quickly that we can help guide the community towards. First, educate yourself about resources available in the community. They include safety resources, hate crimes reporting, crisis line, mental health resources, reporting, as was mentioned, if you are a victim or aware of crimes. Be an ally in solidarity, understand your role and what you can do. I'm going to refer you to Building Movement Project's latest report on the front lines, which details nonprofits that are led by people of color confronting COVID-19 and structural racism. Attend a bystander training. Pull It Back, a national organization offering monthly online training and bystander interventions to stop anti-Asian American harassment and xenophobia. Join a movement such as hashtag Wash the Hate, a movement promoting solidarity in the face of both COVID-19 and the anti-Asian sentiment. Support our amazing local organizations. I'll name a few: the Asian Association of Utah, OCA Asian Pacific Islander American Advocate Utah, Utah chapter of the Japanese American Citizens League. These are amazing local organizations that provide services and advocacy to our community. And lastly, and I think most importantly, I challenge you to be an ally. Take the time to listen, to learn, and to denounce hate. And I think in this day and age when we've had such political division and we're at a time where we really feel broken coming out of COVID, it's the time to engage with our neighbors, to not let that door be closed, to take a risk, to engage and to learn. I think that is the thing we're needing the most in our community now, is I think with so much negative conversation, it's trickled down nationally to here. We've been so held up in our homes. If you can, as we battle out of COVID, safely approach your neighbors and friends and engage. Be willing to go to pastor, join your church for a day or two, join others, get beyond our own boundaries to really understand the depth and breadth in our community. And I would ask that of all of our residents. So with that, I don't know, we've given you a lot of information, press. I don't know if you have any questions. We can take one or two if you do. If not, we'll let everyone go about the rest of their day. Anybody?
For law enforcers, is there anything your agencies are doing differently to make people feel more comfortable reporting? And then can you also address how we handle reports from people who might be undocumented themselves or have undocumented family members?
Yes, what we have been doing for quite some time is trying out into the communities and encouraging them to report crimes, because we know that that is not happening all the time, because many communities don't feel safe by reporting. And you're asking about their legal status here. We don't ask that. We just want to know if you are a victim of crime, and we want to take that report so we can investigate it fully, and then we will take it to the district attorney's office for charges. We don't look at any of your situation regarding where you come from, what you look like. If you're here and you're a victim of crime, we're going to take your report. What law enforcement is doing now is we're trying to engage back with our communities. As you know, with COVID, it's been very tough. There's been a distance, and it's something that we have to overcome. But what we can do is start, once this mask wearing and the COVID distance is over, we can go back to engaging in public with our communities, showing up at various communities and at their events. And that's what law enforcement does. We've just been impacted as well because of the COVID situation, but we are always trying to do prevention. And when we do prevention, it's for all communities. It doesn't matter whether it's the east side, west side, or where you come from, what you look like. We treat everybody the same. And one of the most important pieces to law enforcement is we need to be as diverse as our communities, and we've been pushing that out for some time now. And that's what's happening with law enforcement. We are becoming more diverse. Any other questions? Yes.
This is probably a question for the senator and for the representative, but the mayor talked about a call to action and some things that we as community members can do. What would you really like to see your neighbors doing in order to feel support from us? What are some of the things that we can actually do and jump into in the days ahead to make your community feel supported?
Well, I think it's outreach, and I have talked to the state, and they are wanting to get together and get engaged into the communities and get to know them before things like this happen, so there's trust. I think the bystander intervention is really important. And I mean, I've been getting reports of hate more now, but I've also been getting reports and cards. I should have brought some of them, of people saying, we hate this. We want to know that you're supported and your Asian American and Pacific Islanders are supported. And those kinds of cards and messages are so important, you know. And we just, I think going to the businesses and getting, you know, supporting the Asian American Pacific Islander businesses and expressing that you're there to support them and just being there for your neighbors. Each one of us has a role, and I think we can choose to be kind and we can choose to intervene. And so that's some of it.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for that question. The good senator has touched upon something in psychology that we know how to reduce prejudice, and that's to get to know one another. And so to reach out and to engage, and it's been really hard with COVID to do that. And so many of us, myself included, have gotten so used to being isolated and not want to reach out. And so that is a risk in many different ways. But to go out and connect, to visit and frequent Asian businesses, and to get to know the owners, and to uplift our communities. The Quad Caucus, we call us lovingly the Quad Caucus, and these are the legislators of color. We have been working together probably weekly and at some points daily since last year. And we talk about how we can uplift each other's communities, and for us to do that collectively, that we don't talk over our communities. We become critically aware of our own assumptions about privilege and our own place with privilege. And we uplift those community members to have voice, to continue to reach out in that way. Thank you.
And I just wanted to add, because I didn't say, I do love this county. And right away, Mayor Wilson contacted us to see what can be done. We have to do more than just make a statement. And I appreciate that so much, because Mayor Wilson and I know the county is so supportive to diversity, and that is something very close to my heart, having been in the county. And I just want to recognize that it's true. Our demographics are changing, and we have people that represent us of color in judgeships in every kind of way. Difference, it's growing. And Jake, I don't know if many know Jake Fidesimano, who's a West Valley City Council member, and he's done so much for health inequities and disparities. He's amazing. And Darren Mono's new to the Salt Lake City Council too, and he's been wonderful in getting involved in so many things. And also Tom, we got to know, we had some things that we were helping youth with getting involved in policy. So I want to thank the county so much, because they've been a leader, I think, and just a call to action that we really need to do, and not just words.
All right, one last question if anyone has it. If not, we'll invite our elected officials up for a socially distanced photo here. I think that'd be nice, and Pastor, if you join members of CODA. Any last questions? Okay, let's see if we can awkwardly